really what we wanted to do was just do a couple of things this year, and one was to establish the identity of the Eagles and the way that we wanted to operate the Eagles environment, and the second one was to kind of feed the pathways and begin the next generation. So look at the top of the Eagles, if you consider the men's national team as the top of the chain, and say, let's make that something that's worth being a part of, and then let's start to put the vehicles in place. So, when I look at the end of year tour, I believe that the team has found itself and its identity and its leadership core and the way in which we want to train and play and apply themselves within the sport. And then when you look at the Dom Bisags or the potential of a Stefan Krimp from the 20s coming through into the senior Eagles towards the end of the year, you start to go, okay, maybe we're making some progress towards those two things.
This is show number 2 on the day. It's been a long day. Earlier today, we had USA 7-star Madison Hughes joining us shortly before noon East Coast time. He came in from Dubai, which is like 8:30 around bedtime for him, as he's preparing for his return to USA 7. So check out that podcast if you didn't check us out live. It is live on your favorite podcast player already. But tonight, in a few minutes, we have Scott Lawrence, the USA Rugby Men's 15's interim head coach, joining us in just a few minutes. So please stay tuned for that. I'm Bill Baker of Eagles Overseas, and my co-host is Rugby Morning's John Fitzpatrick. Welcome back, Fitzy. How you doing?
2 shows in a day, man. Again, like I said earlier, am I getting paid double for this?
Like I said, I'm going to pay you at least 100 times. More than did you get a nap in? I mean, it's been a long day.
How did you know?
Because you have young kids. I've been there.
Hey, I nodded off on the couch for a couple minutes.
Good for you. I'm proud of you, man. Hey, by the way, congrats on the 20 years of Washington, D.C. Youth Rugby anniversary coming up, man. You've been a part of that for a while, right? Or a little bit?
For the last maybe 4 years or so, since our oldest started playing touch and now our other 2 are playing. So it's a great nonprofit in the DC area. It's free programs all throughout the year, but primarily in the summer. And yeah, celebrating 20 years, crazy.
20 years is great. I was a small part of the Atlanta Youth High School program when that started back in, when I dabbled with life for half a season and Old White all those years. I'm bringing it up for a reason. But with the high school program in Atlanta, it was so nice to see these kids playing. But you're at the younger age because your kids are younger, right?
Yeah, they're 7, 5.5, and just turned 4. So it's fun. Just kids that age just having a ball in their hand and having fun. And it's like you don't explain the rules too much, but here's the ball run, and So it's a good time.
But that is earlier than you and I ever got into the game. So
by 2 decades.
Hopefully tonight's guest is like, okay, Fitzy, tell me who's good at 4 years old. I want to see him in a few years.
I'll tell you, there's some talented kids in the DC area. I hope they stick with it. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, me too. That'd be great. But I'll tell you what, I really feel like this is one of the biggest days in U.S. Rugby Happy Hour Live history. I know we've only been doing this for a few years now, but our guest earlier, Madison Hughes, has been trying to get on for a long time. Joined us in his debut interview in his return to USA Sevens, and then tonight's guest, obviously off his first year heading up the program for the senior side. It doesn't get much bigger than this. I think we got a lot to talk about with our guest tonight. And again, everyone listening in, tune into that episode from earlier today with Madison Hughes. It is live already on your podcast, your favorite podcast player, iHeart Radio, Spotify. Anyway, YouTube, Facebook Live, that kind of stuff. It's all on there. So check that out. So with that said, Fitzy, let's go. Let's get into our first guest. He's much closer in both miles and time zones than Madison was earlier. Madison was like 6,600 miles away and a couple issues as far as connection goes. But that's just the nature of the game. But our guest tonight is merely maybe 1,000 miles away. I'm assuming he's down in Georgia. We'll talk about that. So hopefully the reception is better. So let's all welcome USA Men's Rugby interim head coach Scott Lawrence. Hey, Scott, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on again, guys.
Was I close? Are you down in ATL right now?
I'm in the ATL. Yeah.
Yeah, the 770 or the 404 or something like that. I forget what they say.
Yeah, it's the
The
404, as they
404.
say here.
Right. So,
Yeah.
are you finally getting a chance to relax with the family?
I don't think there's any time for that.
No, that's it, huh? No.
And that's it. No.
So listen, I mean, we talked about you've already been on a couple of times. We talked in the stages over your first year. So, I mean, other than scouting, researching opponents, coming up with game plans. I mean, were you able to take in any other rugby this past year? Perhaps some World Cup matches as well.
I didn't do any in person. I
Right.
watched most of them remote, but yeah, caught quite a few games, and it's always nice, when you see those teams that have a lot of time together, they get a lot of cohesion, and you start to see some of the new trends emerge throughout the World Cup. So yeah, it's been good to see, and just, I guess, encouraging. I think we saw some of the teams that were in the pools that that we could have been there, and as a playing nation, and I know that we will be able to be in the next one, regardless of the expansion, but that where I think we're on the right track.
Right. And I was going to say, I mean, it's got to be promising for you to see the likes of Portugal, Georgia, Namibia, whatever else, have their shining moments. May not be wins, but their shining moments in the matches. So for you, watching that and be like, yeah, we can do that. At least we can do that.
Yeah, I think so. I think if we look at the landscape and the things that are coming together for us here, it's only going to get better in the next couple of years.
All right, so let's just start off where we ended, or you ended. Spain, La Via International Cup. You closed out the year with wins over Brazil and Spain. That had to feel good. Is that exactly how you hoped it would end?
I think the wins were certainly nice. Really, what we wanted to do was just do a couple of things this year, and one was to establish the identity of the Eagles and the way that we wanted to operate the Eagles environment, and the second one was to kind of feed the pathways and begin the next generation. So look at the top of the Eagles, if you consider the men's national team as the top of the chain, and say, let's make that something that's worth being a part of, and then let's start to put the vehicles in place. So, when I look at the end of year tour, I believe that the team has found itself and its identity and its leadership core, and the way in which we want to train and play and apply themselves within the sport. And then when you look at the Dom B-Sags or the potential of a Stefan Krimp from the 20s coming through into the senior Eagles towards the end of the year, you start to go, okay, maybe we're making some progress towards those two things this year.
Scott, we had Nate Osberger on the show while he was in Spain, and he emphasized how winning is contagious and how important it was for the group to end this season not only with the win, but even a 2-game winning streak. So would you agree with that assessment on how important it is that the winning is contagious for the group?
I think so. I think one of the things that the coaching staff agreed on right from the beginning when we first got together in July was to make it a hyper competitive environment with lots of gameplay and 15 on 15 and small group stuff, so that the feeling of winning and losing and competing and being in tight spots and working your way out was something that was always was continual in the environment. So, that idea, I think, we started to see the team evolve where they were confident to stay the course. They knew they could win. They knew how to win in tight spots where maybe the team hadn't been able to do that in the past, in the last kind of 20 minutes. So, they got to celebrate wins all throughout the week. It was actually quite fun when you have guys like Nate Osberger around who are just positive energy and just bring that celebration of little practice wins, every day. And then, I think it carried over into the games. it feels good for the players to win. I think they need to feel that, and then needs to get the buy-in. For me, I would have been satisfied with the performances we had, regardless of the result.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and speaking of Nate, and calling out some of the individual performances here, Nate seems to be getting better with age, maybe even a position change. But then you have guys like, Joe Mano on the other wing, young and impressive in his debut, and Luke White. He played impressive at 8. Man, he had some really good carries in those matches. What stood out for you from Joe and Luke in their performances in that 2-game winning streak so far?
I think with Joe in game 1, he was probably he'd tell you he was on the scoring end of some team tries, that he could convert in space, and I think the thing that is underrated in Joe's game, and what got him a start in the second game of the series, was his defense. And if you have a instinctual wing who can play high wing defense and make good reads on the edge, it's a game changer. And so when you look at Joe, he benefited from a try in the second part of the game by doing that, and he created an opportunity on the other wing by doing just that. So I think we know Joe is open in space, and he's good in space and a finisher. I think an underrated part of his game is his defense. I think with Luke, it was just putting him in a position to do what Luke does best. Again, Luke was our leading dominant tackler in the team over this series, but working on just some things where he could be more animated with the ball in his hand to give himself a little bit of room. A guy like that, he just needs a half shoulder instead of a full shoulder, and he's going to get through. And so we saw some real growth in Luke's game, in just a little bit of that footwork and animation.
And Scott, you talked about coaching staff earlier. Many of them playing and coaching other rugby nations. What was their take on, our USA's rugby landscape, and, are they handling it well?
They're still learning, but enormously open, and they've just been really good. So they get a bit of a smaller snapshot because they just see the players that are selected. We did a lot to try and connect them via video and coach calls and things like that with the MLR teams. But I think it's safe to say, Alama is now going to be on the ground here, and he's going to learn the landscape, and he's really excited to do that.
Good. Real quick, listeners, if you're here live on the Twitter mobile app, you give us, if you want to have a question for Scott, myself, or Fitz, you can request it from the bottom left of the app, and we'll get you up here as soon as possible, and we'll drop you down after. No offense, we'll just kind of clean up the room. If you are listening in live on YouTube or Facebook, go ahead and drop a comment in those comment sections as well. Get them up here as soon as we can. So, Scott, a shining moment against Spain. I don't know if it had much to do with the result of the match, but to see, Mitch and Bailey Wilson take the pitch together in a USA uniform was a special moment. Was that something written in your notes that if you can make it happen, you would do that for that very exact reason?
Not so much. I think Bailey earned his spot, and he earned his cap, and he started that journey, and he went all the way through tour through Europe, and and then got his game time in Salt Lake City. So we didn't think about it, but it was, I think you go through the capping ceremony after a player earns their first cap. It's a kind of a private thing amongst the team, but I will say it was Mitch was involved in it, and it was a pretty special moment, I think, for everybody.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, the last time they played on the same pitch together outside of that last Utah was the MLR match when Mitch got his butt wrung and knocked out in front of family. So in this instance, it's much better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and glad to see Mitch back up and going again.
Of course.
Yeah. So let's talk about momentum, Scott. Momentum can be, a fleeting feeling, obviously, in sports and life. What would you say? Would you say the program has some momentum going into 24?
I think around the standards of what it means to be an Eagle, I do.
Good.
I think, we had a good sized playing group through this July to November that all stayed on the program. Alex Ross did a fantastic job with our performance, our strength and conditioning, and our overall robustness. And they saw the results of doing the right kind of work, the right intensity. And so that, when players, especially American players, work hard, it's very important for us as Americans to do hard work. And when they do hard work and they can see the result in a metric that says, I have achieved an international level of conditioning, it gives them confidence, immense confidence and belief. And so, I don't know if that's momentum, but I think it's a proof point for them to say, when I go to the very core of what it means to be an American, and that means to work hard, that I'm going to improve, and there's going to be results.
Scott, it's it's review time. You're a teacher here, so you've got you've 5 test matches, I guess 6 games if you count that exhibition against Toulouse. In your tenure as interim head coach, what grade would you give yourself?
Wow, that's a great one. I'm going to say solid B.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, B+. You can go with that.
Bill always got graded on a curve, so his grades were always inflated.
I usually held it down. Curve.
That's the other way to look at it, I guess. But so, B, what would you say needs improvement, or what are you still working on?
I think I'll step back and say, from a GM perspective, I think we were able to focus at the U20s and the senior team, and a little bit on the Hawks, but I think our U18s is a next level of investment, and our criteria around how we select and identify players, and really move from possibly even identifying to more recruiting of players is probably fits our model a little better. So I'd say that was the biggest part of the improvement I'd want to make into next year. I think when we look at the total portfolio of things that make the team really run well, I think we need to press harder on our operational bits in terms of getting maximum performance from the way that we set the environment and the way we travel and things like that. But I think we've got a plan to improve those for next year.
Got it. And if you could have extended the year 2023, say, by another month or 2, would you have been able to accomplish more? Let me try and rephrase that. Was there anything you wish you had more time for in 2023?
Oh my gosh, when you're national team coach, you wish you had time all the time. Now, I think some of the things that that are coming in here in the early part of next year. I mean, I think you guys have seen with the Owen Farrell announcement around kind of mental health and his break from international rugby. I think performance psychology and well-being of the players is something that'll be layered into the men's 15s pathway as programmatically as part of the performance plan for next year. I would have liked to have given that benefit to the players, to set them up for their upcoming MLR season. I think that would have been a real plus for them.
Listeners, real quick again, if you're on YouTube or Facebook, go ahead and leave a comment there, and we'll get it on in here for you. We do have one, which I'll get to here in a minute. But also, for those listening in live on the Twitter app, I do recognize a few of you, including some former Atlanta teammates. So if you want to come up and ask a question, don't be shy. We're awfully nice kind of, except for Fitzy. But come on up, have some questions. If not, we have plenty to talk about ourselves. So, Scott, let's jump into the player pool. Let's talk about current and future players. I'm going to start with the locks right now. Nate Brickley retiring just recently, a really nice last couple matches for him. Savetta retiring a year ago. How are we looking at the second row as far as prospects? I mean, how deep does it go beyond the point of like Greg Peterson, Cam Dillon, and others?
Well, I think if you look at kind of where we're looking, it's in that kind of lock six, highly athletic back row going forward. So, when you look at Sam Gala, I think he's a nice prototype of what the way we see things going forward. I think we saw a lot of growth from CC Mahoney in this year and in the campaign. I think there's a number of kind of lock prospects that have been signed into the MLR this year. We're still pretty young but that's a bit of a wait and see to see if they come through in the next year or so.
And then, looking at more player pathways, we talked about Joe Mano earlier. World Rugby shared a great story about him chronicling the journey he took, to the Warriors and then through men's Eagles program. It seemed like he was almost done on his dream at one point to play top flight. It seems like there are others like Joe Mano, like as well, players out there in the U.S. trying to get discovered. Have you noticed many players like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the other guy that's like that could have easily started in place of Joe. It was a really tough decision. Was Ina Futi?
Oh yeah.
In Seattle. If you listen to Ina's story, he'll tell you, he was almost forgotten there. In Seattle, and then showed back up, and he's a wonderful talent. But I think there's always, even though we're not completely amateur anymore, I think the scouting networks and the identification domestically, even for professional teams and for the national governing body, I think we still got plenty of players that are slipping through the cracks. So it's incumbent on us to have a really solid athlete management. There's software, there's a system for it, but really more the programmatic piece around how we track players and identify players and keep tabs on them. That's a major part of kind of 2024 initiatives.
And then talking about the Hawks, USA Hawks, can you talk more about their program coming into the 2024 season? We'll see more matches. What's that going to look like?
We're going to have between 9 and 10 matches. Wow. So I've got a tentative schedule that's been agreed, and I'm trying to work with our partners to get that signed off here in the next week. So the team will assemble January 6th in Charlotte. We wanted to do that ahead of the Major League Rugby preseason start because of the outcomes we want from the program. Is these guys need an accelerator, a head start. So we wanted to get some extra preseason. By shifting the Hawks a little bit to the left of Major League Rugby, there's less overlap in the number of games that the players would be gone if they're gone from the MLR. So we hope that by going away a little bit early, having 4 full weeks ahead of time, and being able to get anywhere up to 9 to 10 games of appearances will, and then come in, and then it's, week 3 of Major League Rugby. We hope that puts them in a spot to get more minutes.
Well, please do us a favor. Please get it live streamed, all those matches. We got to watch those matches. All right. I'll toss to you, Fitzy.
I'll tell the right people.
We'll have Bill post up his iPhone and a Wi-Fi connection, and
whatever it takes.
There you go.
I'd love to go back to Charlotte. Yes, let's go.
Scott, looking ahead to the 2027 Rugby World Cup cycle, I guess fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, we've had fans have had a year head start after not making the 23 World Cup to start thinking about the cycle for 2027. I guess in terms of, I guess the question was based around fans, but what can they anticipate? Will we see a balance of new players getting time and finding the core 23 for qualifiers, or is it more important to get kind of a core group playing together more than before, kind of lots of minutes together?
Yeah, I think we're going to have a nice full test schedule next year. And we'll continue to do like we have now. You need a core group of players, some of which will be involved in 27 and some of which will not, that need to establish the learning and competitive environment for the other players that are being introduced into it. And so that's an important role, and a lot of these more senior players know that that's their role for the next couple of years. So I think, we capped 15 new Eagles this year, and we will continue as long as they are getting minutes in Major League Rugby and performing well and show upside. We'll continue to introduce more players into the squad in the next year, with the idea of by 2025 and 2026 having a team that's qualified and then go into 2027.
Great, Scott. We've got an online listener question here, talking a little bit about some of the overseas players. Looks like AJ McGinty, he won't be able to return to Bristol till at least February, recovering from a surgery where I think his hamstring ripped off his bone, which sounds extremely painful.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Ruben de Haas recovering from his ACL surgery, although it sounds like he had the same surgeon who fixed the ACL of Khaleesi, and then 4 or 5 months later, he was playing in the Rugby World Cup. So
Yeah.
I guess the question there is, like, what's the plan to bring them along? Is it to kind of slowly to make sure they're healthy and can contribute meaningfully?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, our next really international window access to the players isn't until July of next year, so their return will be well in advance of that, and working with their clubs, and I expect them to have a few months under their belt as long as they stay healthy for an opportunity to be selected next year.
Nicely done. Okay, let's go to our first listener, Aaron Castro. You're out there, man. How you doing?
Can you hear me? I'm trying this on my computer for the first time.
Oh, I'm glad it works that way. I didn't know that worked yet.
Yeah. The last time I was around, it definitely didn't. So I was on my phone. But Scott, I know you're going to hate me because we work together sometimes. But
oh, boy.
I listened to your show with Alex Goff, and then you mentioned some U18 stuff. So I think I'll start with, I guess, blending youth into the senior team, but also one of the guys I listened, because you and I have talked about pathways a lot in the past. And one of the things I'm always concerned with, especially rugby, and especially when we work with MLR teams, is there is this incredible desire to like take control of kids when they're 18, and we want them to only do rugby or whatever it is. But one of the things is, like, for when it comes to, I guess, talent identification and selection, we brought in Dominic Bisag in the summer, and then again this November, and he performed fairly well. I think based on some of the games he's played, he probably wishes he performed even better, but he played a lot of minutes, and we're going to see a really incredible center develop over the next couple of years. But for Jason, I guess the background here is Jason DeVos, who's the general secretary for Soccer Canada, did a deep dive years and years ago about why soccer can't, like, both on the men and women's side, their performance deteriorated, even though that they had more high performance systems and more pathways than ever before. And it was because they were selecting players too young. And this was basically taking kids at 12, 13, 14, and these were going to be our senior internationals. So what is your view, I guess, on, talent ID, and when is it time for players to develop, because I think most of the time when I look at players in Europe and all these guys that, make their professional debut at 19, for every Marcus Smith or Owen Farrell, there are hundreds of players that end up playing 10 games and never make it as professionals.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think there's probably a couple of questions in there, and I think the first one around identifying too early is mine was much smaller scale, but I had a disastrous U20 campaign by picking the squad early and not introducing new players and new competitive. Was a major change. Would never do that again. And that's why every Eagles assembly has more players in it than the ones that'll actually get on the plane to go to the game. Is, you need to have a wider net, and you need to create competition and reward for good performance and in the training environment. So I think the big thing is not necessarily around rigid criteria. You have to have some sort of filtering exercise. You have to be willing to tell somebody their kid's ugly once in a while. But what you really need to have is in what we're driving towards are more experiences for players between the ages of 16 and 18, and then extending the Hawks down into the 18 to 23 age range, so that there is a defined set of time where they're not pushed to be a professional too early, but they're also in a full-time environment where they can develop. And that's the true measure of selection. Right now we're kind of saying we're trying to pick these players, and they're kind of spread out, and some are in good programs and others are in better programs. And I think the big thing is to provide the experiences for them, so that you can actually get a wider pool of players in and see how they matriculate. I think there's more things in the North American soccer landscape than just the selection too early. There's definitely the rigidity and that of the programming and things that led to some of the outcomes not being what they wanted there, and there's lessons to be learned. But I think that's the big thing there.
Scott, do we have another 10 minutes or so from you? Do you have time for that?
Sure.
All right. 2 hours. Great. So let's talk about more players. Now, we love your concept, not the concept, we love your idea about, the desire to play for USA, not just play for USA, but the honor of wearing the uniform, the USA logo on it. So when looking at overseas players, like let's just, for instance, Hawaiian prop, Salanoa, who's in Ireland, USA qualified fly half, Hilsenbeck, who plays in France. Are you concentrating less, more, or the same amount on these overseas talents like them? I mean, with the mindset of what you said about the desire to play for the country, is it one of those things where you just reach out, say you have interest? No, okay, fine, go away. I mean, are you concentrating overseas at all?
For me, it's more at this particular time and where we are with the development of the team is not necessarily recruiting, excuse me, asking guys if they're interested in playing for the United States. Everybody who's been a part of the program has reached out to us so far. And I think that's an important first step to right now, to being the identity of Eagle. And with the growth of our own professional league here and the number of opportunities for American players, that's where we need to be honest, because we have other options. So,
yeah.
So I think that's the big thing is there's a desire to do it. They first reach out, and there are guys that have fallen out of our system that we're trying to get back into our system. So that's where I make a phone call, like a Nafi Mafu, who's he's over at Biarritz right now, coming back from an injury. He would have been in camp had his knee been fully recovered this time around. Great second row prospect for the future. So I reach out to those guys, and for whatever reason, they got lost along the way. They ended up in a French academy somewhere and kind of forgotten, and we try and go track them down.
And sorry, just lost my voice. And speaking of these players overseas, I mean, I wouldn't bring him up because if he wasn't such a talent, but TJ Lamasatelli, I mean, do you have any comment about him not making himself available for USA? It could be any reason, contract, whatever over there, but is he someone that you reached out to, and is he? I don't know. Any comment about that situation?
I didn't reach out to TT because I think Gary went the extra mile in trying to get TT into the Eagles, and ultimately didn't get a response. And
right.
So I didn't at that point when I came on board. I just kind of looked at it and said, if anybody was going to be able to do it and should have done it, it should have happened before. And so, I just kind of moved on from that.
Yeah. Like you said, it's the want to wear the jersey, that kind of thing is important. So, all right, 2024, Scott, what's next? Other than a break for the holidays, obviously for you, or maybe you're not having that, but how are you beginning the 2024 calendar, like the first couple months?
The first thing will be, is to finish up here in December, is to wrap up the year and then do a formal review of what we've done and kind of do that with the players. And then as we move into this next year, it's as the MLR teams are finalizing their rosters, just making sure that we have an accurate gauge and ongoing dialogue with the professional teams around where the American eligible players sit. And then we started to publish metrics to the playing base, the American playing base. Last year, they were quite simple metrics. And we feel like we have a set of kind of energy-driven metrics that we'll be talking to MLR teams about, to players about, that go along with not only the number of minutes and appearances, but the quality of the minutes that they're producing from week to week. I think what that does is gives us confidence that these things are metrics that drive really high density intensity, so that they can perform at the international level, but play in their club's system and establish hopefully a common language for selection. So that'll roll out, in the first couple of months. Obviously, we'll be focused on getting the Hawks up and running and getting those games, and then through the season, we'll be visiting teams and visiting players and watching games and trying to pick the best squad for July.
Yes, Scott, and as we look into 2024 more, fans, they care about games, right? And I'm checking my notes here. I could have this number wrong, but I'm reading potentially 13 games in 2024, including the rebranded Pacific Nations Cup, when the international window opens up. But I guess, can you share when the first test matches in 2024 will be?
Yeah, it should be July 6th, and then the 13th will be the first two, and then we'll look at a third in that kind of July, August. I think one of the things that'll be coming out here, as we go with Pacific Nations Cup, is a new Reg 9 window, which is, the release window for professional players to international rugby, will be grouped into the Southern Hemisphere calendar, which means a big window, August and September. So I think we'll probably I don't think we'll get to 13. I think you'll see 3 in kind of the July window, 3 in November, that's 6, and then a potential of 5 through the PNC. It can be 4 or 5 depending on performance.
So Scott, 1 or 2 more questions for you. I want to touch on MLR with you really quick. Obviously, you have history with MLR. Any worry about the conflict with the July playoffs and the July international window, and how will that be handled?
Sure. I think definitely I wouldn't say a worry, but it is something we have to work through. It's inevitable. It's a professional league that needs to that's providing players professional opportunities and needs to be commercially viable. So there's reasons for the schedule change on the Major League Rugby side. On the international rugby side, what it means is between now and 1 week before July 6th, we won't see the players in camp. And so, you're going to kind of go away for 8 months and maybe get 5 to 6 days of prep before your first test match. So I think, we'll have to work on making sure through the metrics I talked about, the players come in good condition, that we maintain connection to the team and alignment leading into July, but expect their performances to be what they are in early July with, as time increases together in August and September through the PNC. I think we'll see the teams start to, play the way they should.
And there's no issues with availability of players, right? I mean, other leagues say a top 14, whatever contracts have worked where some players cannot be released. There's no issue for that, right?
That's right. I mean, it's there's a Reg 9 window.
Okay.
Yep, and which says, we notify all the leagues ahead of time, but on the other hand, there's always human behavior is what it is, and sometimes there's things said to players, about renewal of contracts and things, and that certainly happened in the past,
Again, with MLR, with your history with RugbyATL, or Atlanta, generally speaking, with other clubs, what's your take on Atlanta losing an MLR franchise? I mean, that's a tough break.
I think it's disappointing for the city here, I think, and kind of the playing community. I think the fan community that got around the team. I think obviously the Rattlers were, that group of fans were a great group, and I think that part of it's a bit sad. I think the 404. Well, it turned into a different name, but at the time it was the 404 Academy, and what what we were doing there. I think I think that part will certainly be missed. But I think the thing that's really dawned on all of us is with the passing of Marcus Calloway and ultimately what that meant for Atlanta, and then the passing of Bill Webb and what that meant for Toronto, and those are two men who are just absolutely, the best human beings on the planet, and you lose them, and there's a lot of other things that go with it. So it's disappointing, but it's even more disappointing, for Toronto, and what's happened there.
Yeah, I wish we had more time to talk about that, but Scott, I did one final question for you. And this is more just around the America's Rugby Championship, but I'm hearing rumors that potentially that's coming back, but more as a U23 level style competition.
I don't think the ARC in its form. What I have seen is some potential for some kind of U23 competition inside of what's called RAN, so and I think there's an opportunity for that. I think for us, the way we're approaching it is it's another opportunity for our U20s to play. We obviously have an ambition to go back to the Junior World Trophy again this year, and so time together starting in May will be critical, and I think it'll fall into that window.
All right, Scott, listen, man, that's all we have, all the time we have. I mean, if we had to say it all over again, we would strip the interim tag off your title because, one, it's a mouthful when introducing you, and two, because you and really pretty much every USA fan believes you deserve it. So seriously, good luck in this next 2024, not just for the team alone, but for you as far as head coach. And we really do looking forward to talking to you again soon.
All right. Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thanks, man. Enjoy the holidays.
You too.
Thank you. Have a good night. Ooh, Fitzy, man, I wish we had like 3 hours because there was a lot going on. We had more to talk about.
He committed to 10 more, and you said 2 hours, so I thought all of it.
And as soon as we say goodbye, he's like, boom, he's gone. He's not even on anymore. But I do want to say the Rugby Atlanta deal is tough. I mean, I have a personal connection to Atlanta and all that, and I know I'm looking at other major cities or rugby regions like New York, Boston, California area, all those. Atlanta, they do have a number of teams. There's a good handful of adult sides. College teams are growing up. Kennesaw State has a program that really has picked up. So it was a bummer to look at those highlights and watch those games and see maybe 500 people in the stands. It's tough. I know DC wasn't much better, but I think they picked up as the years went on.
Definitely.
Yeah, so it's tough to see that team go. I think they're going to be in LA. We haven't seen a damn thing about it.
Castro, you want to come back on?
Yeah, come on, Castro, let's go. Oh, he's gone. Damn it.
You got some comments on that?
Anyway, with that said, guys, we're sorry about Toronto. We really, it's tough to see Canada lose a program, a franchise. I think people out there asking Ryan Reynolds to jump in and buy a team. I don't know if that's going to work at all, but yeah, it's tough for MLR. But that was a good show. I think Scott had a lot of great things to say about the program, and a few things kind of surprised us about TT not reaching out to him, about the overseas players. Still reaching them as well. Anything else that caught your mind? Caught your brain?
For me, I think the operative word is, maybe two words: momentum and just maybe optimism. That's what I'm feeling. 2024.
Oh, me too. I'm very optimistic myself, and not just 24, but the next, the 27 cycle, getting into that World Cup. I'm really excited about it.
Well, Bill, you've been drinking Scotch whiskey since we started, so I'm sure you're feeling good.
I've been drinking Scotch whiskey since we ended with Madison Hughes at noon. All right. Before I start messing my words up, let's call it a night. Hey, everybody, thanks so much for tuning in. If you missed Madison Hughes, check it out on your favorite podcast player. It is live right now. If you missed most of today's show, it will be live by tomorrow afternoon, Thursday afternoon on your favorite podcast player. And also we will have videos on YouTube and Facebook if you want to listen to it that way. Again, thank you all for tuning in. Check us out next weekend. Thanks again. Have a great week.